Welcome back YouTube, Nick here bringing you another awesome how-to video. Today we'll be changing the rear tires on our Ford 555E backhoe. Normally we do repairs ourselves, but because this is a bigger job, we brought in the professional. Darrell from Darrell's Tire Service in Shelbyville, Tennessee came on out to our farm to get our rear tires in shape. Alright, so let's jump right into the repair. Step 1 is pulling the tire from the machine. Once the tire is removed, we will pull the valve stem to let the air out and then coat the outside of the tire in a substance to keep the tire from sticking to the wheel. Darrell referred to this as Mama's secret recipe. I think it was Dawn dish soap. After this, Darrell breaks the bead using a little sledgehammer tool that you whack outside the wheel to move the tire. Once the bead is broken, grab yourself some big ass tire irons and unspoon that side of the tire from the wheel. Once you get that side undone, you'll turn the tire around, coat it and de-bead it the same, but this time you will pull the wheel through and start to pull the tire off of the wheel. Once you get that tire spoon started, the pro technique is to flip the tire down on the ground, and Darrell physically sat on that to hold it in place while working the other irons in and pulling the wheel out of the tire. We originally intended to run these tires tubeless, but found out that there was a small hole in it after installing this first tire, so we end up tubing them as well. So you'll get a how-to for both tubeless and with the tube. After fighting it a little bit, we got the wheel removed, so time to get that out of here and bring the new tire in. Now on to installing tire number 1. Darrell started by adding grease to the side. This is to help lubricate the tire and keep it from sticking to the wheel. Make sure that you're putting these tires on the correct direction. They are directional. Once you have it greased up, you'll just lay it on the wheel, and Darrell has another fancy tool, which is a smaller spoon that he used to lever that side of the bead onto the tire. After getting one side on, you'll simply grease the other side. This time Darrell grabbed a big spoon and worked it on again. I know he makes it look really easy, but I promise you this is harder than it looks. To bead a tire in a tubeless system can sometimes be hard. What Darrell did is he pulled out this fancy tool called a bead zuka, filled it with compressed air, and then hooked the air compressor up to the valve stem. While the tire was filling, he shot an air cannon into the side, which essentially popped it on the wheel and allowed the air to pressurize the rubber. From here, we rolled it over to the machine to install, and as you can see, there was some small holes in the tire. With holes like these, you have two options. One, you can try to patch it, but we figured these holes, if there's one, there's probably a couple, so we ended up installing tubes on both tires. What this means is it's time to de-bead one side of the tire and put a tube in. This will be the exact same process as the original, but instead of pulling it off the other side, we'll slide the tire back, climb in, and install the tube. You will also have to make sure you remove the valve stem for the tubeless system. Whenever you're putting a tube in, make sure that tire is nice and clean. If there's anything in there, it can wear and rub on the tube. So Darrell vacuumed out the tire, threaded in the new valve stem on the tube, and got everything in place. Once you have the tube installed, we laid it down and beat it on the tire just like before. Now that the tire is on and the tube is in place, it is much easier to bead. To bead a tire with a tube, it's as simple as throwing the air compressor on it and watching the magic happen. We set these rear tires to 30 psi and then we wheeled it over to the machine, lifted it up, and bolted it back on. And now that we got that installed, we officially have one tire and on to the other side. For the other side, we are going to do a similar process, but we actually installed the tire on the machine. Because it wasn't tubeless, we went with this method, which is similar to how we installed the tube. To get things started, same thing as before, unbolt the wheel, pull the air out of the tire, and coat it with Mama's secret recipe. From there, Darrell breaks the bead and then pulls the tire off one side of the wheel, flips it over, breaks the bead, and then we go through the same process of pulling the wheel out of the tire. Once we got this wheel out, you'll notice it was a lot dirtier, and because we were installing a tube from the start, we spent some time to clean it up. Once we got the wheel nice and clean, we brought it over to the machine, lifted it up and bolted it on because we will be installing the tire from here. When swapping this side's tire, the valve stem was stuck in the wheel, so I grabbed an angle grinder and ground through the bolt, and then we just beat the valve stem out of the wheel. Once the valve stem was out, we greased up one side of the tire, lifted it up on the machine, and used the fancy little spoon to pop on one side. Once one side is on, rinse and repeat as before. Grab the vacuum, cleaned out the tire, brought the tube over, put it in, threaded the valve stem through the wheel. Then it's time to throw a little grease on that outside edge and bead on the rest of the tire. And now that the tire is on, the only step left is to throw some air in it. Once again, want to give another huge shout out to Darrell with Darrell's Tire Service in Shelbyville, Tennessee. Not only did he come out, change these tires in just a couple hours by himself, but he also taught us how to do it along the way. If you need tires changed in the Central Tennessee area, look him up. He's great. Thanks again for tuning in to another how-to video from the Broll Brothers. We'll catch you the next time our equipment breaks.